social media has allowed us to look into other people's lives. And I mean, like, really from morning till night, we can see what people are doing. And so there is room to yearn for somebody else's life, for somebody else's working situations, whether they be freelancers, whether they've been influencers, whether they own their own business, or whether they work in a job that they earn that hundreds of thousands each year. We can see that very intimately now. Hey, what's up? I'm Adam. If you're new here, and if you're returning, then you know what's good. Today I want to talk about the Great Resignation, this idea that there's a mass exodus of people from the workplace. People are unhappy at work with their situations and they're looking for something different. Now, whilst that's a vast oversimplification of the whole, I don't know if you like theory or grandiose statement of the Great Resignation, what I really want to talk about in this video is, if you are thinking about leaving your job or you're unhappy at work, I want to give you practical steps that I think you can do and take before you make that big step of resigning in this whole haze of, I want a different life and this is just awful and nothing's working out. I will split this video into 3 parts. The first part will be kind of an explanation of this whole Great Resignation thing. What does it even really mean? Part 2 will be about ways that you can make changes in your current job depending on what's irking you, what's making you uncomfortable and unhappy, to, you know, have a better experience at that workplace. And the third will be, well, if you've decided that all of those things considered, this place still isn't for me and I need to step, what you should really think about to avoid getting yourself trapped in those same cycles of, you know, oh, I'm at a new job, but I still really dislike this one and I'm still unhappy, or I've set up this business or whatever it is. So let's just get into it. So what is the Great Resignation? Well, it is a term that's being used to express the idea, like I said, that people are choosing or appear to be choosing to leave their jobs, their current places of employment, in the hopes and dreams of a better phase in their career, let's say, whether that be leaving to start a new job, whether it be leaving to start a company, whatever it is, right? It's this movement from one current position of employment into another one because you're unsatisfied with that. Okay, so there are a number of statistics that would suggest that this whole max exodus is actually happening and that people are unhappy. One statistic from the Department of Labor in the US confirmed that 4 million people had quit their job in April. And whilst this was a big spike by comparison to the year before and some of the trend in general, there is some caveats that it may just be because the market's kind of stabilized a bit more after all the turmoil of the world events. But nonetheless, 41% of the global workforce is considering a job change in the next year. 41% globally. I can see a yearning for meaning in work, and that millennials, especially in Gen Z, may not be getting. And I've seen on YouTube there are a lot of videos around this whole, you know, the Great Resignation topic and things like that, or I don't dream of labor and all these things. So I think whether you believe those statistics are accurately depicting the Great Resignation or not, we can tell that there is a sentiment that is around employment and people feeling like they're not really getting the value time exchange, like it's not particularly working out for them. So a few reasons that are cited for this include things like being brought back into the office after working from home and becoming comfortable with that. There's also the ideas of burnout. People are just feeling exhausted. This model where you work 5 days a week, some people work 6, more and less, but let's take the average of 5 days a week, 9 to 5, and you get, you know, 4 weeks holiday, maybe 6 weeks holiday a year. It's leading to burnout for some people. There's also some issues for stagnation in pay. People just aren't seeing their wages go up in the way that they want or they expect, or perhaps they don't feel like they're being fairly remunerated for their skills. What I think is perhaps one of the biggest reasons for this dissatisfaction with one's work, especially in the younger generations, is social media. And what I mean by this is social media has allowed us to look into other people's lives. And I mean, like, really from morning till night, we can see what people are doing. In a way that wasn't once possible. And so there is room to yearn for somebody else's life, for somebody else's working situations, whether they be freelancers, whether they've been influencers, whether they own their own business, or whether they work in a job that they earn that hundreds of thousands each year. We can see that very intimately now. And it leaves the individual, I think, yearning for more in themselves and their lives. So all that being said, that's some of the reasons why the Great Resignation is so popular right now, or why it's in the forefront of so many people's mind. And perhaps you've been thinking about leaving work and, you know, you're unhappy with where you are. But before we all rush and start talking about, you know, we're all leaving our jobs and all that, because that sounds fun in fairness, but there's bills to be paid, there's things that need to be thought about before you just go like, oh, I'm going to quit my job as a nurse to be a fashion blogger. That could be a really cool thing if that's what you want to do. But if you don't consider all the right things, then you could end up in trouble. So I think this whole romanticizing work or romanticizing a life other than yours is very powerful in some ways, in that encouraging you to yearn for more and do more, right? But it's also very dangerous as romanticizing anything that you're not quite sure of. So part 2 is about improving your current work situation, right? What can you do within your current employment situation to yield to better results for yourself, right? To yield a happier work experience. And the first thing I want to touch on is if you have a dissatisfaction with the quality of work. So perhaps you've entered this job and it really isn't what you signed up for. Like you find yourself doing a lot of admin tasks that it wasn't what you planned on doing. It's not harnessing your skill sets, what you perhaps went to university for, what you perhaps did a course for months or whatever it is. And you're really dissatisfied with that. Well, I think there's a number of things that you can do within your current place of employment to get past this particular issue. And the first one is perhaps you reach out to other departments. So maybe the department you've landed in isn't really, like I said, using your skills to the best capacity, or perhaps your interests lie in another department. Well, whilst you still have to do your work, there's usually scope, depending on how heavy your workload is, to reach out to other departments to find out what's going on, to find out how you may be involved in other projects and things like that. I obviously come from tech, so I know that there's a lot of fluidity in certain companies to do things like that. And it may not be as fluid in other companies, but I think there's usually a way that you can embed yourself in other things going on in companies, so long as it doesn't impact your work. So leading on to that, you may propose to your company new ways of working or new ways of interacting with clients that do use your skill sets, right? So that way you're melding the need of the company and you're finding a way that you can align your skill sets with that in a way that makes sense. And you can maybe lead projects or help lead projects that bring the company to a new place. Now, a lot of these things I'm going to say will require research. Like you're not just going to go up to your manager or whatever your line manager and be like, yeah, cool, this is how we're going to run things now. They're going to look at you like, Mary, if you don't get your... But there is scope to do that. And it just depends on how passionately you feel about this and how passionately you want to make your situation work. So the next thing under quality of work is you don't feel like you are at the level of seniority that you should be, or you're not really being dealt or dished out the responsibilities that you think you should, that you are trained up for, that you're entitled to. I'll give you an example of this. When I worked at Virgin Active part-time whilst I was at university, I'd been there for 2 years at this point. And whilst I wasn't looking for anything permanent, like a permanent manager position or anything like that, I did feel like it was a waste of my talents and skills to still be in the same position and have no new responsibilities. And so I took it upon myself to speak to my manager, my line manager, and be like, I'd really be interested in helping you out a little bit more with what you do in the back office, right? Like maybe taking on some more of that client-facing work in terms of payments, in terms of complaints and stuff like that. I think it would be a good opportunity for me. And she agreed. I'd been there for 2 years. I knew the ropes and it wasn't going to impact my work at the front desk. So why not give it a shot? So take that initiative. If you feel like you can take on more and want to for your own benefit, like I'm not suggesting that you just take on all the work in the company for the bants, but consider it, go for it, right? A final point I want to talk about under quality of work, and this is drawing on my tech experience here. In tech, there's this concept of toil, right? These manual tasks that keep getting done over and over again that are time consuming and they're labor intensive. And this may be something that's affecting your quality of work because you are spending so much time on these particular tasks. Like maybe it's an admin task that you do every single day that takes an hour or whatever it is, or a physical task whatever that particular task is. As someone who's an SRE, I'm always thinking, all right, how can I automate this task? Right? Or how can I get a tool to do the job that I'm supposed to be doing so I can work on other more important things, like more creative things, more proactive work? And you don't have to be in tech to do this. I mean, it helps if you're working with technology in a sense that maybe you're using computers or something like that. But by no means do you need to be a coder or anything to make use of this. You could be in marketing, you could be in healthcare, anything. But there could be a tool that's out there. There often is a tool that's designed to remove that toil, right? Remove those manual repetitive tasks. And you can suggest that to your line manager. Again, you'd have to weigh up the pros and cons of the new tool, the cost of the new tool, training people up in this new tool. But if you can make a good enough case, then it's quite possible that you could have on your hands a tool that does that, so that your quality of work can be improved because you're spending time on this now versus those tasks, repetitive, manual, time-consuming things. Another reason you may be dissatisfied with your job and current position is there's a lack of upskilling, a lack of investment in your development, right? And drawing on from some of the things you spoke about in the first point, a good way to do this is to come to your company or manager, whoever, and you need to propose why investing in you is a good thing for them, right? Whatever position you're in, what is the benefit of them to investing in you? And that may be you going on a course or a series of courses, or it may be blocking out an hour a week for you to do maybe not an elaborate course, but maybe for you to dive deeper into the company or into particular tools or into particular skills that will help you be better at your job. Ultimately, the skill you need to learn needs to help you be better at the job that you're doing, right? Otherwise, the company's going to think, why would I invest? But often it can be down to you to come to your boss with that information. Your boss is working on so many things, and some are better and worse at taking time out to consider your development. And if they were finding that your boss isn't doing that, then you do that, right? You gather all the information, make it easy for them, and say, this is a win-win for everyone. I become more skilled, more developed, and you have on your hands someone who's more competent at this job. I know. Okay, so the next point here is you may be dissatisfied because of the quantity of work. And often people find themselves burned out because they are just doing too much. And not only are they doing too much, there is poor time management within the company or within your department, or really just you. And here's a complex space, but you have to toe the line between that can-do attitude, which you should be going to work with, right, and actually burning yourself out because you're taking on way too much work. And there's several ways, I guess, that you can come at this. On a day-to-day, it may mean saying no when you're asked to do a task, or and when I say no, I don't mean your manager says, can you do this? And you say like, no, bro, I'm busy. But you genuinely explain why that task can't be done right now and why there's other things that are high priority that need to be done. Or you explain, well, if I take on this task, it's with the understanding that perhaps some of these other ones are going to have to be moved to another day. Instead of you now trying to do 50 million tasks in one day, the quality may be deprecated because of it. You instead make logical and reasonable points for why this particular job may not get done today. Okay. And I think people respect that, or at least that communication is respected. And then on a longer scale, on a longer time scale, if you're finding yourself swarmed with work all the time, it may mean you have meetings with your team as a whole. Maybe think of restructuring. Come to your line manager with maybe ways you think things could be improved. Okay. And maybe, like I said, it could be things like removing the toil with a tool so you've got more time and you feel like you've got less work, or you do have less work, right? Objectively, if a machine's doing some things, then you can work on the other things. But perhaps it's just not evenly spread within the team and you're not using people's skills to the maximum. Maybe there's someone who's really good at this, but you're doing that job and taking double the amount of time. And that's on top of all the other work you're doing, whereas you who may be taking one of their tasks. There's so many ways that you can get creative, I think, at work. And again, I'm not saying it's always perfect or it's always going to work, but there are things that you can consider if you are unhappy and would like to not be unhappy or at least move into a happier place. The final reason I'm going to discuss here why you may not be happy with your job and thinking of resigning is pay, the money, cash dollar. Like, you're not making enough peace and it's stressing you out and you don't feel like the work you're doing, you don't feel like you're being fairly remunerated for your work. And so what do you do in this sort of situation? Now, this one is kind of techie because obviously you signed your contract likely or whatever you're doing with this particular package in mind. Like, you signed up to X amount of money a month or whatever. However, if your skill sets have changed or your workload has changed, and you feel like you can prove this, like it's documented, you can say that, well, when we started this job, I was doing this, but now I've taken on this particular role and that. And, actually my skill sets improved tenfold in this particular aspect. And I am under the belief that I should be getting more. I deserve a X amount of pay rise. And there's going into how you ask for pay rises and is a whole thing in itself. But the main thing is you need to show one, value, and that you're two, indispensable, or that replacing you would be more work than just giving you the pay rise that you want. There are ways that you can document and show this. And maybe things like the number of sales you've done and consistently outperforming everyone around you. Or it may be things that you've done in operations, if you're like an operations manager or something like that, like how you have saved the company money or improved the happiness of the employees, whatever it is. If you can show consistently that you are outperforming what you believe the package you're on now, the compensation package you have now is reflecting, then you have a higher chance of being able to get that paycheck. There's a caveat here that when you ask for pay rises, and somebody once told me this and I've heard of, that sometimes you have to be willing to walk away. Nonetheless, if you do want a pay rise, you need to show you're valuable enough and you need to show that you deserve a pay rise, because people don't just be handing out cash for no reason. So part 3 is about moving on to the new phase of your life, right? The new phase of generating income, maybe a new job, maybe a business, whatever it is. And it's about doing the work so you avoid falling into the same trap, the same cycle of unhappiness, new job, new thing, still hate it. And that's what we're going to talk about now. And the first thing I think you have to do, and I've spoken about the importance of being clear and intentional with what it is you're trying to achieve, is write down what is non-negotiable for you and what's negotiable. And by that, I mean, life is a series of trade-offs, and often you will have to exchange one thing for another. And it may be that you don't mind working longer hours if you are more aligned with the company vision, or you don't mind doing more work if you are going to be paid a bit more. Whatever it is, you have to decide what is acceptable and what is unacceptable in this new phase. Otherwise, you're going to move from where you were to a new position of unhappiness, and eventually those feelings of wanting to leave and being unhappy with life and being a part of the great resignation will just resurface. So the next point I want to make is perhaps the work you're doing on a day-to-day basis is not the problem, but the model that underpins it is. And what I mean by this is perhaps you're a full-time employee, the standard 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and that's not working for you. But you kind of enjoy the work, but it's that whole model that's really kind of making you uncomfortable and happy. Well, maybe then you should focus your efforts on becoming a freelancer in that same industry or same position, or becoming self-employed or being a contractor, right? It doesn't always necessarily mean you have to throw the whole thing in the bin because you're unhappy with one element of it. You can explore ways that you can still do that type of work if you're passionate about it, but, within a different model of work. So consider that. Consider maybe you will be happier as a contractor. Some contractors work a few months in the year, make a lot of money or make a decent amount of money, and then don't work for the rest of the year. Some people are more freelancers. They work several days a week. Some days they don't work, right? There's ways that you can, if you have the right skill sets, govern and determine your own work schedule in your life. The next thing I think you should consider if you are now moving on and you are going to take the next step is, do you have the skills you need to be successful in this next phase? And if not, how do you acquire them? I made that analogy before about, maybe perhaps you're a nurse and you're thinking you want to be a fashion blogger. Do you have any of the things you need to be a fashion blogger? It might sound nice and all these new things that you want to do. You want to start a business, but have you considered what it's going to take to make this real, right? To fulfill this new dream, this new phase that you want to enter? And if not, then what do you need to do to get it, right? Perhaps you need a portfolio. Perhaps you need to start generating an income before you leave. Perhaps you want to get into tech and you're going to need to start, you need some programming skills or whatever it is. It could be a range of things, and it all depends on where you're trying to go to next. But it's really important, that phase, I think, that research phase of, okay, where am I now and what do I need to do to get to the next phase? Another point I want to make is to consider if you would actually benefit from taking some time off work before you move into your new position. And if that is the case, how can you make it happen? Sometimes we jump from position to position to position, from job to job to job, obviously out of necessity, like somebody's got to pay these bills. But often you can take on or find yourself again trapped in that cycle of unhappiness because you haven't taken a moment to just step back and breathe. So now you've left that old job that was stressing you out. Perhaps you've entered a new one, and then you've got all the, not the anxieties necessarily, but all of the work and the feelings and emotions that come with starting a new job with new responsibilities. You're at the bottom now. You've got to learn again. You've got to learn this company, how it works. And you've not taken any time in between to just chill and breathe. And if that is what you want to do, then maybe you're going to have to make some tough decisions, right? Okay, I'm going to be saving for these next 3 months really, really hard. I'm going to cut my expenses down so I can take a month out and be fine and then join my new company. You're going to say to your company, okay, I want a couple of weeks before I start. And things are negotiable. Sometimes it's going to be possible. Sometimes it's not. but explore it if you want to. I think a lot of us are always scared, and I understand why, to even throw things out there and explore opportunities. But sometimes we're missing out on so much of life because of that. And the final thing I want to talk about is using social media responsibly to explore your next phase in life. And what I mean by this is using things like YouTube and I don't know about TikTok. I'm not on there, so I can't really speak too much about that. But using these resources that exist where people are documenting their life and what they do and being quite open about the work they do, using those to help you decide whether this is the next phase that you want to go on. When I said responsibly, I really meant that. I don't mean romanticizing someone else's life to the point where you've got this fairy tale dream of what it means to be an influencer, or what it means to be a freelance this, or what it means to work in one of the big four, whatever. I mean, using your critical thinking skills to weigh up the pros and cons of that new phase. And you can also use things like LinkedIn. I remember when I was deciding whether I wanted to go back to uni, I had a place at Imperial to do engineering, and I spoke to a few people. I obviously didn't end up going, as you can tell, because there's nothing. I probably would have told you guys if I'd end up taking up my place at Imperial College, but I didn't, because I explored, I did my research, and I was like, all things being said and done, and the fact that I'm not even going to be in class, it's going to be remote, this probably isn't for me. Now, obviously, that's not necessarily about next stage of employment, but you get the point I'm making. I reached out to those people on LinkedIn. I asked them about their experiences, things that were going on in their lives, and they was really honest, and I'm really grateful for that. So I say all this to say, I think it's normal to strive for more, to want more, especially in our current age where we can see people doing so many things, and some of these things are amazing and creative and just fantastic, and you're like, I want to do that. But I think we also have to ground ourselves in some level of reality. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, and really explore what it means to just quit my job, or not dream of labor, or whatever it is, wherever you're sourcing your newfound desire to just quit. And if you decide that quitting is for you, and you've considered everything, then I do think you should go for it, because you only have one life. And so if you think you've explored and exhausted your current position completely, then why not embark on the next phase of life if you can? Anyway, that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do like it. Please do engage with the video. It does helps the channel, and it just lets me know that you enjoy this type of content as well. So yeah, I guess that's it.